Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg and 11 others were detained by Israeli forces after their Gaza-bound aid boat, the Madeleine, was intercepted in international waters and then towed to Ashdod. The group, carrying symbolic aid, is now being processed for deportation at Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion airport. Those refusing deportation may face legal proceedings. The interception has drawn condemnation from Turkey and Iran, while France urged the return of its citizens. The activists' mission was part of the Freedom Flotilla Coalition's efforts to challenge Israel's blockade on Gaza, which Israeli officials defend as necessary for security. A separate land convoy from Tunisia is also attempting a symbolic challenge to the blockade, The Guardian has reported. Meanwhile, Israel faces criticism over limited aid access to Gaza and the controversial U.S.-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Russia and Ukraine have begun the first stage of a new prisoner swap following last week's peace talks in Istanbul. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed the exchange involved wounded soldiers and young detainees under the age of 25, though exact numbers were not disclosed. This comes after their largest swap in May, where each side exchanged 390 individuals. Meanwhile, Russia launched one of the largest drone attacks of the war, with Ukraine claiming to have downed 292 of the 479 drones. Polish fighter jets were scrambled as a precaution, though Polish airspace was not violated, ABC News has reported. Russia also accused Ukraine of drone attacks in its Kursk region, injuring 2 people. A Chinese aircraft carrier group entered Japan's exclusive economic zone, or the EEZ, for the first time, raising concerns in Tokyo about China's expanding naval presence. The Liaoning carrier, 2 missile destroyers, and a supply ship entered the EEZ before exiting to conduct military drills. Japan's defense ministry responded by deploying a warship to monitor the situation. And while no formal protest has been confirmed, Japan conveyed a message to China and expressed concern over its growing military activity near Japanese waters, The Guardian has reported. The incident adds to ongoing tensions over territorial disputes and strategic resources in the region. Kyiv faced a major overnight aerial assault with waves of drones and missiles causing explosions and fires across multiple districts. Dozens of drones were launched, while many were intercepted. Some hit their targets, injuring at least 2 people. The attack follows one of the war's largest drone strikes a day earlier, when Russia launched over 470 drones across Ukraine, ABC News has reported. This escalation came shortly after Russia and Ukraine began a new prisoner swap, agreed upon during recent peace talks in Istanbul. Several beaches in southeast Spain's Valencia region were closed after mysterious white particles, resembling plastic pellets, washed ashore. Authorities cited a possible marine spill and urged the public to avoid swimming. The substance was found near the mouth of the Serpis River and may have an inland origin. Environmental samples have been collected for testing, and officials are working to determine the material's identity and potential risks, CBS News has reported. The incident affected beaches just north of popular tourist areas along the Costa Blanca. A battalion of about 500 U.S. Marines was mobilized into Los Angeles to protect federal property and personnel amid violent anti-immigration enforcement protests, Fox News reported. The Marines from the 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines at 29 Palms, will not perform law enforcement duties, but the rules of engagement remain unclear. This follows President Trump's earlier deployment of 2,000 National Guardsmen. California Governor Gavin Newsom criticized the move as an overreach, filing a lawsuit and calling the escalation, quote, unprecedented, Fox News has reported. Protesters erupted in response to ICE raids that have resulted in widespread destruction in the city of Los Angeles. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has removed all 17 members of the CDC's Vaccine Advisory Committee, aiming to restore public trust in vaccine guidance. Kennedy criticized the previous committee as influenced by industry interest and said the move ensures future decisions are based on transparent, unbiased science. The Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices makes key recommendations on vaccine safety and efficacy. Most of the ousted members were appointed by the Biden administration, with 13 named in 2024, ABC7 New York has reported. Kennedy pledged the new appointees will focus solely on public health and evidence-based medicine. David Huerta, president of California's SEIU, has been charged with interfering with law enforcement during anti-ICE protests in Los Angeles. He was arrested Friday for allegedly blocking a gate at an ICE staging area and refusing to move when asked by federal officers. Huerta, who was injured during the arrest and later hospitalized, faces a felony charge of conspiracy to impede an officer and could face up to 6 years in prison if convicted. His arrest has sparked backlash from California Governor Gavin Newsom and other Democratic leaders, who called him a respected advocate, CBS News has reported. Protests and ICE raids continued throughout the weekend, with 44 undocumented immigrants being arrested. U.S. authorities have arrested a Chinese doctoral student from Wuhan for allegedly smuggling biological materials into the United States without proper permits. Han, the Chinese national, was detained Sunday at the Detroit airport and accused of concealing roundworm-related material in shipments to a University of Michigan lab, where she planned to conduct research. The FBI says Han lied to agents and deleted her device's contents before arriving. This follows a similar case last week involving 2 other Chinese nationals tied to smuggling a toxic fungus, NBC News has reported. Han remains in custody ahead of a bond hearing. 6 people were killed when a twin-engine Cessna 414 crashed into the ocean off San Diego on Sunday, just minutes after takeoff. The pilot issued a mayday call, reporting difficulty maintaining heading and altitude before being advised to divert into a nearby naval air station. The plane reached only 2,100 feet before crashing under unclear circumstances. The FAA and the NTSB are investigating, and the Coast Guard is searching for the debris field, CNN has reported. Weather at the time was overcast but not severe. President Trump announced a new federal program Monday to create $1,000 tax-deferred investment accounts for every U.S. baby born from 2025 to 2029. Dubbed Trump accounts, these would track the stock market and allow up to $5,000 in annual private contributions. Major CEOs from companies like Uber, Goldman Sachs, and Dell pledged billions in support. The program is part of a broader budget bill passed by the House but faces opposition in the U.S. Senate, The Guardian has reported. Critics, including the Congressional Budget Office, warned that it could add $2.5 trillion to the national debt and reduce Medicaid and food aid. Representative Mark Green, a Republican from Tennessee, chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, announced on Monday that he will resign from Congress after an upcoming vote on President Trump's major legislative package. Green, who has served since 2019, said he's leaving for a private sector opportunity that he could not pass up. A longtime Trump ally, Green cited his work on border security and tax cuts as key achievements. He had planned to retire earlier but stayed to support Trump's agenda, Fox News has reported. A special election will be held to fill his seat, which is expected to remain Republican. Amazon announced a $20 billion investment to build 2 data center complexes in Pennsylvania, including one next to the nuclear power plant where it plans to draw power directly. The other center will be in Fairless Hills, powered by the electricity grid. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro called it the largest private sector investment in state history and highlighted the job creation, tax revenue, and training programs tied to the project. The power arrangement with the nuclear plant, involving a behind-the-meter connection, is under federal review by the FERC due to concerns about fairness and grid impact, the Associated Press has reported. This investment is part of a broader tech push to expand energy-intensive data centers amid rising demand for cloud computing and AI. Former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro is set to appear before the Supreme Court this week, accused of leading a far-right conspiracy to overturn the 2022 election results in that country and to stay in power. Bolsonaro, and 7 alleged co-conspirators, including top former officials and military leaders, face accusations of plotting to arrest or kill political rivals and stage a coup after his defeat by Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Experts widely expect Bolsonaro to be convicted, though it's unclear if he'll serve any time, The Guardian has reported. Despite being barred from running, Bolsonaro remains influential, with several allies seen as potential 2026 presidential contenders. China has offered some relief to U.S. and European automakers amid rare earth export restrictions by creating a quote green channel to speed up export license approvals for EU firms. This follows trade talks between Chinese and EU officials and comes after China imposed rare earth export curbs in response to U.S. tariffs. The move also included granting licenses to suppliers of General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, helping ease immediate production concerns, CNBC has reported. However, industry experts remain cautious, noting bureaucratic hurdles and urging Europe to diversify supply chains as Chinese actions stem from ongoing trade tensions. Colombian President Gustavo Petro claimed a conservative presidential candidate's security was, quote, strangely reduced before he was shot, raising concerns of a possible plot. Senator Miguel Uribe, 39, was critically wounded by a 15-year-old alleged hitman while campaigning in Bogotá. Authorities say the attacker used a gun bought legally in the state of Arizona, but do not know yet who hired him. Petro, while condemning the attack, also alleged threats against himself and called for a full investigation, Barron's has reported. Uribe's lawyer filed a complaint against the head of Colombia's protection agency, citing ignored requests to boost Uribe's security. Argentina's former president, Cristina Kirchner, convicted of corruption and sentenced to 6 years in prison, urged her supporters to organize amid fears of her arrest if her Supreme Court appeal fails. Kirchner, barred from holding office due to her sentence, is running for a Buenos Aires provincial legislature seat to gain immunity, but could be disqualified if the court rules against her before the September election. Once a dominant leader and a vice president until 2023, she remains a fierce critic of the current Libertarian president, Javier Milei, Barron's has reported. Warner Bros. Discovery announced plans to split into 2 public companies by mid-2026, one focusing on streaming and studios, including HBO Max and movie properties, and a global networks company, including CNN and TNT Sports. The move reflects industry shifts as consumers move from cable to streaming, aiming to give each company more strategic focus. This follows similar steps by Comcast to separate traditional pay TV networks from streaming. Despite losses in traditional TV, the networks remain profitable and generate cash used to support streaming growth. However, Warner Bros. Discovery acknowledged sports have not significantly driven their streaming platform's success, CNBC has reported. Asteroid 2024 YR4, once considered the highest impact risk to Earth ever recorded, now poses no threat to our planet, but has slightly increased its odds of hitting the moon in the year 2032, from 3.8% to 4.3%, according to NASA. The James Webb Space Telescope recently helped refine its trajectory by 20%. First detected in late 2023, the asteroid briefly sparked alarm with a 3.1% chance of impacting Earth, but later data ruled out all future Earth threats, Space.com has reported. While a lunar impact is unlikely and not dangerous, the asteroid gave scientists a valuable real-world test of planetary defense systems. Calar Lodge, a council-run home care in East London, is using technology like robot pets and Amazon Alexas to support its 43 dementia residents. As part of a new care tech initiative launched in 2023 with provider Alcove, the home has introduced robotic dogs and cats that reduce distress and encourage interaction, even among nonverbal residents. Digital translators have also helped non-English speakers communicate better, boosting social interaction and self-esteem, the BBC has reported. Staff say these tools are improving residents' emotional well-being and reducing social isolation. A tragic school shooting in Graz, Austria, left 10 people dead 9 students aged between 15 and 17, and 1 teacher, after a 21-year-old former student opened fire at his old high school on Tuesday. The gunman, armed with a rifle and a handgun, later took his own life. Authorities found a suicide note, a video message, and a non-functional bomb at his home. Several others were injured, though all are now in stable condition, CNN has reported. The incident has shocked the country, where gun violence is rare, despite relatively high civilian gun ownership. A year after Boeing's troubled crewed test flight of the CST-100 Starliner, NASA still hasn't decided on the spacecraft's next mission, or whether it will be crewed or uncrewed. The next flight isn't expected before early 2026, pending resolution of technical issues like thruster failures and helium leaks. Budget cuts and ongoing testing have delayed decisions, while Boeing remains quiet amid speculation it might exit the program after incurring $2 billion in losses. NASA stresses the need for a backup to SpaceX's Crew Dragon, but shrinking funds may threaten Starliner's future, Space News has reported. Russia launched one of its largest attacks on Ukraine's capital of Kyiv and the port city of Odessa early Tuesday, killing 3 people and injuring at least 13. President Zelensky said Russia fired 315 drones and 7 missiles, damaging a maternity hospital and a residential area. The assault followed a massive drone barrage the previous night and came amid stalled peace talks in Istanbul. While progress on a ceasefire remains elusive, both sides have begun exchanging prisoners of war, including seriously wounded Ukrainian soldiers, the Associated Press has reported. Families continue to wait anxiously for news of missing loved ones. The Israeli Navy carried out a rare long-range strike on Yemen's Houthi-controlled port city on Tuesday, aiming to halt its use for military purposes. This is according to the IDF. The precision strike was launched from a SAR-6 vessel and marked a significant escalation in Israel's response to ongoing Houthi threats. The attack followed recent Houthi missile attempts against Israel, including one intercepted over Jerusalem. U.S. officials blame Iran for sustaining the Houthi threat, Fox News has reported. And despite the strike, Houthi leaders vowed continued support for Gaza and further operations against Israel. At least 7 people, including 2 police officers, were killed in a wave of coordinated bomb and gun attacks in southwestern Colombia, targeting Cali and surrounding towns. The attacks involved car and motorcycle bombs, rifle fire, and a suspected drone, with up to 50 injured. Authorities suspect a faction of the former FARC guerrilla group may be responsible. Colombia's Ministry of Defense linked the violence to armed groups retaliating against recent military operations, the BBC has reported. The unrest follows an attempted assassination of a presidential candidate, Miguel Uribe, in Bogota, for which a 15-year-old suspect has been detained. Authorities believe they may have spotted Travis Decker, a former soldier wanted for the murders of his 3 young daughters, near a remote alpine lake in Washington state. A helicopter crew saw a lone hiker near Kolchak Lake who fled upon being spotted, prompting a renewed search in the mountainous area. Decker, 32, has been the focus of a manhunt since June the 2nd, when the bodies of his daughters, ages 5, 8, and 9, were found suffocated at the campground, the Associated Press has reported. He is trained in survival and has previously lived off the grid. A $20,000 reward is being offered for the information leading to his arrest. Anthony Wainwright, 54, was executed by lethal injection in Florida on Tuesday for the 1994 kidnapping, rape, and murder of 23-year-old Carmen Gayhart. Wainwright and another man, Richard Hamilton, abducted Gayhart from a supermarket parking lot, assaulted her, and fatally shot her. Both men had escaped from a North Carolina prison prior to that crime. Hamilton died on death row in 2023. Wainwright's lawyers filed multiple appeals, citing alleged trial errors and intellectual disability, but the U.S. Supreme Court denied them, NBC News has reported. Gayhart's family said that justice was long overdue after 3 decades of waiting. Riots erupted for a second night in Ballymena, Northern Ireland, following protest over an alleged sexual assault involving two teenage boys. Homes and cars were set on fire, and police came under attack with petrol bombs, rocks, and scaffolding. Officers responded with water cannon and plastic baton rounds. Calm was restored around 1 a.m. local time, Yahoo News has reported. The unrest began after the teens appeared in court on Monday, accused of assaulting a teenage girl. Los Angeles police made mass arrests in the city's downtown area Tuesday night after protesters defied a curfew imposed amid ongoing demonstrations against President Trump's immigration crackdown and military deployment. Over 300 people have been arrested in recent days. The unrest follows President Trump's order to deploy thousands of National Guard troops and Marines to Los Angeles, despite strong opposition from California governors. Governor Gavin Newsom and state leaders have sued to block the federal military presence, calling it unlawful and escalatory, The Guardian has reported. Trump defended the move, vowing to, quote, liberate Los Angeles. The body of missing Navy seaman Angelina Resendez, 21, was found in a wooded area near Naval Station Norfolk, Virginia. She had last been seen on May the 29th at her barracks. A fellow Navy sailor has been placed in pretrial confinement in connection with her death, with charges pending under military law. Resendez's disappearance had been considered critical, and her family reported her missing after she failed to show up for work or respond to any messages, Fox News has reported. NCIS is leading the investigation and is pledged to ensure accountability, though further details are being withheld during the ongoing investigation. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio criticized the UK, Norway, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand for sanctioning two far-right Israeli ministers over their comments on Gaza. Rubio said the sanctions hinder efforts for a ceasefire and urged their reversal, affirming U.S. support for Israel. The UK and allies accused the ministers of inciting violence against Palestinians, Politico has reported. Israel condemned the sanctions as, quote, outrageous, with plans to respond soon. U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee also called the sanctions an overreach. Argentina's top court banned former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner from holding office and upheld her 6-year prison sentence for a 2022 fraud conviction involving public works contracts. This ruling blocks her planned run in Buenos Aires provincial elections and likely ends her political career. Kirchner, a divisive leftist leader from 2007 to 2015, denies any wrongdoing and calls the case political persecution. Her supporters protested in Buenos Aires after the verdict, CNN has reported. The decision would either fracture or galvanize her coalition, which is searching for new leadership amid political shifts. Philippine senators formed an impeachment court for Vice President Sara Duterte's corruption and criminal allegations, but voted to send the complaints back to the House of Representatives over legal issues, delaying her trial. The decision sparked protest and criticism from senators demanding an immediate trial. Duterte was impeached in February on charges including assassination plotting and corruption, deepening political tensions with President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Duterte's supporters claimed the impeachment is politically motivated to block her 2028 presidential bid, the Associated Press has reported. She is the daughter of former President Rodrigo Duterte, who faces crimes against humanity charges at the International Criminal Court. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk called for a vote of confidence in his pro-EU government, following a narrow loss by his camp in the recent presidential election. The vote, expected to pass easily due to his coalition's majority in parliament, aims to reaffirm his mandate amid challenges posed by President-elect Karl Nawrocki, a conservative backed by the opposition who is likely to continue using his veto power. Tusk announced a cabinet reshuffle and emphasized his government's achievements in defense and migration, while avoiding divisive issues like abortion and judicial reforms, which face strong conservative resistance and presidential vetoes, the BBC has reported. Brazil's former far-right president Jair Bolsonaro denied any involvement in an alleged coup plot to overturn the 2022 election that he lost to President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva during his first testimony before the Brazilian Supreme Court. Bolsonaro and 7 allies face charges of planning to stay in power despite defeat, with possible prison terms of up to 40 years. The prosecution says the plot failed due to a lack of military support, Al Jazeera has reported. A co-defendant turned witness testified that Bolsonaro reviewed and edited a draft decree for a state of emergency and that cash was allegedly provided to fund a plan to assassinate Lula, his vice president, and a top judge. Consumer prices in the United States rose less than expected in May, with the inflation rate holding at 2.4%, as President Trump's tariffs have yet to significantly impact prices, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported. Core inflation, excluding food and energy, also came in below forecast. Declines in energy, vehicle, and apparel prices helped offset increases in shelter and food costs. Experts caution that tariff-related price hikes may still appear in coming months, CNBC has reported. Meanwhile, the Trump administration continues trade negotiations, including talks with China aiming to resolve tariff disputes by early July. At least 240 people were killed in one of India's worst air disasters when Air India plane bound for London crashed on Thursday. The crash, which occurred shortly after takeoff, also struck a college hostel, killing several medical students. Only one passenger survived with multiple injuries, but is now out of danger, officials have said. The Associated Press has reported. General Motors plans to invest $4 billion to shift production from Mexico to 3 U.S. plants, including reopening the Orion assembly plant near Detroit. The move will bring full-size SUVs and pickups to Orion, Fairfax, Kansas, and Spring Hill, Tennessee, partly driven by rising demand for SUVs and to avoid costly tariffs imposed by President Trump. GM CEO emphasized the commitment to American manufacturing and jobs. The reshoring is seen as a major win for Trump's trade policies aimed at reviving U.S. industry. While GM assured Mexico its plants would continue operating without any layoffs, the shift marks a significant step in bringing auto production back to the United States, the Detroit News has reported. The move received praise from politicians and labor unions, highlighting its impact on Michigan's economy and the broader auto sector. A small hammerhead shark mysteriously fell onto the Splinter City golf course in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina on May 18th. The cause wasn't a weather event, but an osprey that had dropped the shark after being chased by crows. Witnesses Jonathan Marlowe saw the unusual moment near the 11th hole. While wildlife like snakes and alligators are common in the area, a shark in the woods was a first, Live Science has reported. The hammerhead likely came from the nearby ocean, as several species, including the rare Carolina hammerhead, inhabit the South Carolina coast. Israel is reportedly preparing for potential military action against Iran, possibly without U.S. support, according to multiple sources. In response, Iran launched early military drills and received a warning from a regional ally about a possible strike. Tensions are rising ahead of U.S.-Iran nuclear talks, set for Sunday in Oman. The U.S. has authorized the evacuation of some personnel in Iraq and the Middle East as a precaution, though officials stress there is no immediate threat, the Jerusalem Post has reported. Iraq and the U.S. Embassy in Bahrain both reported no changes to security or operations. Representative LaMonica McIver was indicted on 3 federal charges for allegedly interfering with law enforcement during a May oversight visit to an ICE detention center in Newark. Prosecutors claim she physically resisted officers as they arrested Newark Mayor Ras Baraka. McIver, who denies any wrongdoing, called the charges politically motivated and vowed to fight them in court, NBC News has reported. The indictment comes amid accusations of political retaliation and has sparked partisan responses, with Republicans praising the move and Democrats denouncing it as intimidation. The annual Bilderberg meeting began Thursday in Sweden, providing a private forum for influential leaders to discuss global issues amid strained U.S. Europe relations under President Trump. Founded back in 1954 to strengthen transatlantic ties, the event is closed to the media, which is fueling conspiracy theories. This year's topics include Ukraine, AI, and critical raw materials, with notable attendees like NATO chief Mark Rutte and Microsoft CEO. AOL.com has reported. While the meeting's secrecy is intended to encourage open dialogue, experts say its true influence is unclear and often overstated. A Japanese patrol aircraft was intercepted twice by Chinese fighter jets launched from an aircraft carrier in the Western Pacific last weekend, which prompted safety concerns. The incidents occurred in international airspace, with one jet flying as close as 45 meters from the Japanese plane. Japan's defense ministry condemned the abnormal maneuvers, warning of collision risks. China, operating both of its carriers beyond the first island chain, insists the deployments are routine and legal, Newsweek has reported. Tensions remain high as such close encounters are expected to continue near Japan's outer islands. A JetBlue flight skidded off the runway at Boston Logan Airport on Thursday morning, just hours after a deadly Air India crash killed 244 people. JetBlue Flight 312 from Chicago landed at 11:49 a.m. local time before veering into the grass. No injuries were reported, and passengers were safely bused to the terminal. The runway was closed and a ground stop was issued. JetBlue is investigating the incident. Meanwhile, the Air India crash involved a Boeing 787 that may have lost power after takeoff, the Daily Mail has reported. Indian authorities are investigating the cause. The U.S. is evacuating non-essential personnel from embassies and bases across the Middle East amid rising tensions, particularly involving Iran and Israel. While the exact trigger remains unclear, officials cite increased regional risk, with U.S. Central Command closely monitoring the situation. The U.S. Embassy in Israel issued travel restrictions, and embassies in Iraq, Bahrain, Kuwait are preparing for staff departures now. President Trump, citing reduced confidence in reaching a nuclear deal with Iran, warned of potential danger, CNN has reported. Meanwhile, Iran threatened U.S. forces in the region if the talks collapse, which were escalating concerns of a conflict. Senator Alex Padilla was forcibly removed from a press conference in Los Angeles on Thursday, while questioning Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem during her remarks on ICE operations. Padilla, a California Democrat, was escorted out after stating, quote, "You insist on exaggerating," and then identified himself as a U.S. Senator while he was being pushed out. Video later showed him handcuffed and face down outside the room. Noem continued speaking, criticizing California leadership. The incident highlights ongoing tensions between state and federal officials over immigration enforcement, NBC4 Los Angeles has reported. Padilla, the first Latino U.S. Senator from California, has roots in Los Angeles and a background in immigrant advocacy. At least 4 people were killed in San Antonio on Thursday after severe flooding swept vehicles off roads and prompted multiple rescues. Police said 15 vehicles were affected and 10 people were rescued, while search efforts continue. A flash flood warning remains in effect due to heavy rain from Gulf moisture, with up to 7 inches falling in some areas. Road closures and flood risks extend across parts of Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma, with southeastern Texas facing the highest danger, ABC News has reported. Authorities are urging residents to avoid flooded roads. A New York judge declared a mistrial Thursday on one of the charges in Harvey Weinstein's retrial after the jury foreman refused to continue deliberations, citing fear of other jurors. The jury had already convicted Weinstein of a criminal sex act involving Mimi Haley and acquitted him on another count, but failed to reach a verdict on the rape charge involving Jessica Mann. Mann said that she's willing to testify again if needed. prosecutors plan to retry the case, while Weinstein's attorney alleges juror misconduct and intends to appeal, ABC News has reported. Weinstein maintains his innocence and faces a lengthy prison sentence from prior convictions. The CIA has released 54 newly declassified documents related to the 1968 assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, following an executive order from President Trump aimed at increasing transparency. The 1,450 pages include intelligence reports, interagency correspondence, and CIA responses to the killing. One document, over 800 pages, details the global investigation into assassin Sirhan Sirhan's background and motives, CBS News has reported. CIA Director John Ratcliffe and RFK's son, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., praised the release as a step toward government accountability. David Hogg has stepped down as vice chair of the Democratic National Committee and will not run in the upcoming redo election, citing disagreements over the role and a desire to focus on his PAC, Leaders We Deserve. Hogg said the conflict with DNC leadership, including Chair Ken Martin, was distracting from the party's broader goals. Despite tensions, both Hogg and Martin expressed mutual respect, ABC News has reported. The DNC election will proceed without Hogg, leaving fellow Vice Chair Malcolm Kenyatta unopposed for now. Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced the deployment of over 5,000 National Guard troops and 2,000 state police to support local law enforcement during protest against President Trump and federal immigration raids. While protests in cities like San Antonio, Austin, and Dallas have been mostly peaceful, some earlier demonstrations did see clashes with the police. Governor Abbott emphasized that violence and property damage will not be tolerated. The move highlights a stark contrast with California's approach and continues Abbott's aggressive use of the National Guard for immigration enforcement under Operation Lone Star, the Associated Press has reported. Local mayors say that they did not request the military presence. Democratic Governors J.B. Pritzker, Tim Walz, and Kathy Hochul defended their state's immigration policies during a Republican-led House Oversight Committee hearing, amid nationwide tensions over immigration enforcement. The governors criticized President Trump's deployment of U.S. troops to Los Angeles in response to protest, calling it federal overreach. Republicans accused the states of enabling crime through sanctuary policies, but the governors argued immigration enforcement is a federal responsibility, ABC News has reported. They then emphasized the need for coordination and compassionate policies, while rejecting claims that their states obstruct law enforcement or harbor violent criminals. President Trump is promoting a new $5 million Trump Card program, offering wealthy immigrants a fast track to U.S. legal residency, with a wait list now open at trumpcard.gov. The card, described as a more exclusive version of a green card, could eventually lead to citizenship. Applicants must provide personal and regional details to join the waitlist. Trump claims the initiative could raise up to $5 trillion by selling 1 million cards, aiming to replace the EB-5 visa program, CBS News has reported. However, legal experts question whether the program is lawful without congressional approval. President Trump signed a resolution blocking California's plan to ban the sale of new gas-powered cars by 2035, reversing the state's landmark climate policy. California, along with 10 other Democratic-led states, immediately filed a lawsuit challenging the move. President Trump also overturned state rules on truck emissions and air pollution, calling California's regulations, quote, crazy, and favoring combustion engines over electric vehicles. Critics, including Governor Gavin Newsom and environmental groups, accused President Trump of prioritizing polluters over public health, The Guardian has reported. The rollback is part of Trump's broader agenda to revive fossil fuels and auto manufacturing. President Trump intensified his criticism of Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell on Thursday, calling him a numbskull for refusing to cut interest rates. Trump claimed a 2-point rate cut could save the United States $600 billion annually and suggested he might force something if the Fed doesn't act. His remarks followed a lower than expected rise in producer prices and echoed similar comments from Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and Vice President J.D. Vance, who also pressured the Fed to lower rates, CNBC has reported. Despite the rhetoric, markets were largely unaffected, with traders still expecting no rate cut in the Fed's upcoming meetings. Iranian state media has confirmed the death of IRGC commander Hossein Salami in an Israeli strike on the IRGC headquarters. Salami was a key figure in Iran's military leadership and oversaw its ballistic missile arsenal. Israel believes it also killed Iran's top military chief, Mohammad Bagheri, along with other senior officers and nuclear scientists. The IRGC is a powerful force within Iran's theocratic regime, the Times of Israel has reported. Israel has launched multiple waves of airstrikes across Iran, targeting nuclear sites and military facilities, killing senior Iranian officials and nuclear scientists. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu described the operation, called Nation of Lions, as necessary to stop Iran's nuclear threat. Attacks hit key locations, including Tehran. Among the dead are top Iranian commanders Hossein Soleimani and Mohammad Bagheri. Iran's supreme leader vowed a harsh response, while Iran's foreign ministry accused the United States of coordinating the strikes. Israel is bracing for missile and drone retaliation, imposing strict security measures and closing airspace. The U.S. denies involvement, but has warned Iran against targeting American interests amid ongoing nuclear talks, Al Jazeera has reported. Iran has threatened to target U.S. bases if conflict escalates. Israeli airstrikes have killed Major General Mohammad Bagheri, Iran's top military officer. This is according to Iranian state media. He is the second senior Iranian figure reportedly killed in the unprecedented attack following earlier reports of General Hossein Salami's death. Israel executed a deception operation to mislead both Iranian leadership and the public, according to an Israeli official. The plan involved secret coordination and strategic media manipulation, CNN has reported. Despite this, the United States media began reporting imminent Israeli action on Thursday, following warnings from U.S. intelligence and precautionary moves by the Oracle shares jumped 8% in after-hours trading after the company reported stronger than expected earnings and revenue for its fiscal fourth quarter, with signs of accelerating cloud growth. Adjusted earnings per share came in at $1.70 versus $1.64, which was expected, and revenue reached $15.9 billion versus the $15.59 billion that was expected. CEO Safra Katz projected over 70% cloud infrastructure growth in fiscal 2026 and forecast revenue exceeding $67 billion, which is above analyst estimates, CNBC has reported. Oracle also announced major partnerships, including with Cleveland Clinic, G42, and IBM, and noted surging cloud demand, including a massive order for all available capacity. GameStop shares fell 23% after announcing a $1.75 billion convertible notes offering to help fund its Bitcoin investment strategy and shift focus to trading cards. The company recently bought 4,710 Bitcoins and plans further crypto investments. CEO Ryan Cohen cited Bitcoin's fixed supply as a hedge against macro risks. GameStop also reported a 17% revenue decline in quarter one, fueling skepticism about its strategy. Analysts remain doubtful, comparing the move to MicroStrategy's volatile crypto approach, CNBC has reported. Meanwhile, GameStop is leaning into trading cards, which saw a 54% revenue increase driven by strong demand for Pokemon cards. 4 detainees escaped from the Delaney Hall Immigration Detention Center in Newark, New Jersey, following what officials describe as an uprising tied to food access issues. The men, identified as Honduran and Colombian nationals, previously arrested for serious crimes, broke through a wall and remain at large. A $10,000 reward is being offered for information on their whereabouts. The incident has sparked scrutiny over facility conditions, with reports of food shortages and denied visitation. Local leaders and lawmakers are demanding answers and calling for potential closure of the privately run facility, ABC News has reported. The situation is under investigation by DHS and the FBI. The European Space Agency's Solar Orbiter has captured and sent back the first ever images and video of the Sun's South Pole, offering groundbreaking insights into the Sun's behavior. These closest, most detailed images will help scientists understand how solar magnetic fields shift and trigger powerful storms that can disrupt satellites and power grids on Earth. The data fills a key gap in solar science by showing how magnetic fields migrate toward the poles and flip every 11 years, causing chaotic solar activity, the BBC has reported. The mission aims to improve space weather forecasting by modeling the sun's behavior, with early findings already revealing how solar particles move and are ejected into space. Iran launched a large-scale missile attack on central Tel Aviv late Friday, striking Israel's military headquarters and causing significant damage. At least one missile reportedly hit Israel's equivalent of the Pentagon, breaching air defenses. The assault included around 150 ballistic missiles, targeting military and residential areas, and killing at least 3 Israelis and injuring over 40. In response, Israel carried out extensive airstrikes on Iranian military and nuclear sites, reportedly killing at least 20 senior Iranian commanders and 6 nuclear scientists, the New York Post has reported. The escalation follows failed negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. Iran launched a major missile attack on Tel Aviv Friday night in retaliation for Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear and military sites. While the Tel Aviv strike caused property damage, no injuries were initially reported there. However, at least 34 people were injured in other parts of Israel. Iran described the barrage as the start of its crushing response to Israeli attacks that killed 78 people, including top Iranian generals and several nuclear scientists. Israel's operation, dubbed Rising Lion, targeted key nuclear facilities. Israeli leaders called the strikes necessary to counter an existential threat, Newsweek has reported. Iran vowed further retaliation, calling Israel's actions state terrorism at the United Nations. Over the weekend, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, targeting Iran's nuclear and missile infrastructure. The strikes killed top Iranian military leaders and nuclear scientists, and in retaliation, Iran launched missile attacks on Tel Aviv and other parts of Israel. At least 13 people were killed in the Iranian strikes as of Sunday, Fox News has reported. 2 Minnesota lawmakers and their spouses were shot by a suspect impersonating a police officer. Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband were killed, while Senator John Hoffman and his wife were injured in separate overnight shootings in Brooklyn Park and Chaplin. A shelter-in-place alert was issued. The suspect is a white man with brown hair wearing black body armor over a blue shirt and pants, and is considered armed and dangerous. Authorities identified the suspect as 57-year-old Vance Boletter, and the FBI issued a reward of up to $50,000 for information leading to his arrest and conviction. Residents are urged not to approach him and to verify any law enforcement presence before opening their doors, Fox 9 has reported. Multiple active crime scenes are being investigated, with Brooklyn Park Police leading the effort. SpaceX reached a major milestone with the 500th mission of its Falcon rocket family on June the 12th. A Falcon 9 launched 26 Starlink satellites from California's Vandenberg Space Force Base, successfully deploying them into low Earth orbit. The rocket's first stage landed on the drone ship Of Course I Still Love You, marking its 15th reuse, Space.com has reported. This was SpaceX's 72nd Falcon 9 launch of 2025, 54 of which supported the Starlink internet constellation, now the world's largest active network with over 7,600 active satellites. Tesla is suing former engineer Jay Lee, accusing him of stealing trade secrets from its Optimus humanoid robot program and launching a rival startup, Perception Inc., just days after leaving the company. Tesla claims that Lee copied key designs, including advanced robotic hand technology, and then used them to create a nearly identical product, the Pro Hand. The lawsuit seeks damages and an injunction to stop the use of Tesla's proprietary tech. The legal battle comes as Tesla pushes to rapidly scale its Optimus robots, with CEO Elon Musk calling it the company's biggest future product, Quartz has reported. The case highlights both the promise and the vulnerability of Tesla's robotics ambitions. A London-bound Air India flight crashed into a residential area shortly after takeoff on Thursday, killing 241 of 242 people on board and causing additional casualties on the ground. Doctors have confirmed the recovery of 270 bodies, and DNA identification efforts are ongoing. Vigils have been held across India and the United Kingdom, while India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, assisted by the United States and the United Kingdom, is investigating the crash, the BBC has reported. A black box has been recovered, and India's aviation regulator has ordered safety checks on Air India's Boeing 787 fleet as a precaution. A French woman in her 60s has been arrested in Iceland, suspected of murdering her husband and daughter while the family was vacationing. The two victims were found with stab wounds at an upscale hotel, and the woman was discovered injured and is now in custody until June the 20th. Police have not confirmed the identities or relationships of those involved, and the investigation is still in its early stages, CBS News has reported. Murders are rare in Iceland, a country known for its low crime rate. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer confirmed the United Kingdom is moving military assets, including jets, to the Middle East in response to escalating conflict between Israel and Iran. Speaking ahead of the G7 summit, Starmer and other European leaders urged both sides to de-escalate, warning of wider regional instability. Iran has threatened to strike Western military bases if they support Israel, while calls for diplomatic talks on Iran's nuclear program have been renewed by Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, Politico has reported. The growing conflict follows Israel's strikes on Iran and its ongoing war in Gaza, drawing increasing concern from the international community. An Italian museum is urging visitors to respect artwork after a tourist couple damaged a crystal-covered chair and then fled. Security footage from Verona's Palazzo shows the pair posing for photos before the man accidentally fell on the Van Gogh chair, breaking its two legs. Although the damage has since been repaired, the museum released footage to raise awareness about the importance of respecting art, CBS News has reported. Officials have contacted police, criticizing the couple for leaving without reporting the incident. A shooting during a large No Kings protest in Salt Lake City, Utah on Saturday night left one person critically injured and another wounded. The incident occurred near 151 South State Street as about 10,000 people marched peacefully, prompting panic and swift response from the police, who arrested two individuals and detained the suspected shooter. Authorities are still investigating the motive and whether those involved were part of the protest, the Utah News Dispatch has reported. City and state leaders condemned the violence, praised the police response, and emphasized that protests were largely peaceful in nature. Multiple rioters were arrested Saturday night in Portland, Oregon, after a protest near an ICE facility turned violent, injuring 4 officers. The unrest followed a peaceful No Kings demonstration that happened earlier in the day. Police declared a riot after federal officers were attacked with fireworks, rocks, and smoke grenades, and property was then damaged, Fox News has reported. 3 individuals were arrested, with more arrests possible as investigations continue. Police in Culpeper, Virginia, arrested 21-year-old Joseph R. Cheklik for allegedly driving an SUV through a crowd at a No Kings anti-Trump protest on Saturday. Authorities say he intentionally accelerated into the dispersing crowd, though no injuries were reported. Cheklik was charged with reckless driving and is being held without bond, Axios has reported. The incident occurred amid other protest-related threats and violence across the United States, including a deadly shooting of 2 Minnesota lawmakers. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Salvadorian man who was mistakenly deported from the United States before being returned to face criminal charges, pleaded not guilty to human trafficking and conspiracy charges in Tennessee. Trump officials accuse him of being an MS-13 gang member, which his lawyers and his family deny. Abrego Garcia, who first entered the U.S. illegally in 2011 and then was granted protection in 2019, was deported in March of 2025 by mistake and then later brought back to face charges of transporting migrants illegally. Prosecutors allege that he helped move thousands of undocumented migrants across state lines since 2016. His lawyers called the case preposterous and a, quote, abuse of power, the BBC has reported. A judge postponed a decision on his detention before trial. French President Emmanuel Macron visited Greenland's capital, becoming the first foreign leader to do so since President Trump's threats to annex the territory. Macron condemned the idea of using force to acquire Greenland, emphasizing France and the EU's support for Greenland's sovereignty. Welcomed by Danish and Greenlandic leaders, Macron held talks focused on Arctic security, climate change, and European cooperation with respect for Greenland's independence. His visit, invited by Danish and Greenlandic authorities, contrasts with the controversial reception of U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance earlier this year, Radio France International has reported. Greenland, rich in resources and strategically located, seeks independence from Denmark, but not U.S. control, as Arctic geopolitics intensify amid climate change and military competition. Vance Boelter, 57 years old, is now in custody after allegedly shooting 2 Minnesota lawmakers and their spouses in politically motivated attacks early on Saturday. Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband were killed in Brooklyn Park, while Senator John Hoffman and his wife were wounded in Chaplin and are recovering. The 36-hour manhunt, described as the largest in state history, ended Sunday near Boelter's home in Green Isle, CBS News has reported. Authorities have charged him with 2 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. Hours after Israeli strikes on Iran's nuclear and military sites, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called on the Iranian people to rise up against their regime. Highlighting Iran's support for terrorism and internal oppression, Netanyahu said the attacks aimed to prevent threats to Israel and to weaken the regime. Experts note that Iran's oppressed minority groups could play a key role in toppling the government if united. Protests sparked by Masha Amini's death back in 2022 continue despite harsh crackdowns, Fox News has reported. Netanyahu emphasized that Israel's fight is against the regime, not the Iranian people, urging them to seize this moment for change. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin held a 50-minute phone call on Saturday to discuss the escalating Israel-Iran conflict and Ukraine peace efforts. Trump said Putin called to wish him a happy birthday and to talk primarily about Iran, which both leaders agreed poses a serious threat. Putin condemned Israel's strikes on Iran and warned of dangerous escalation, while President Trump said the conflict should end alongside Russia's war in Ukraine. Putin offered Russia's help in mediating U.S.-Iran nuclear talks and shared updates on prisoner swaps with Ukraine, CBS News has reported. Both leaders expressed interest in renewed diplomacy on Iran and Ukraine. Boeing projects a more than 40% rise in global air travel demand by the year 2030, requiring 43,600 new aircraft through the year 2044. This is according to its latest 20-year forecast. While the total plane demand remains steady from last year, Boeing slightly lowered its growth expectations for passenger traffic, cargo, and the global economy. Single-aisle jets like the 737 MAX will dominate future deliveries. Boeing faces ongoing production challenges and regulatory limits following recent safety issues, including a mid-air incident and a fatal crash, CNBC has reported. Growth in China and Southeast Asia will drive much of the new aircraft demand. Taiwan has added Chinese tech giants Huawei and SMIC to its export control list, requiring Taiwanese firms to obtain permits before selling to them. The move, reflecting rising U.S. China Taiwan tech tensions, places the firms alongside sanctioned entities like the Taliban and Al Qaeda. Both Huawei and SMIC are already under U.S. sanctions and are developing China's top AI chips to rival U.S. firms like NVIDIA, the Associated Press has reported. Taiwan, home to leading chipmaker TSMC, has aligned with the United States' efforts to curb China's access to advanced semiconductors. NASA is targeting June 19th for the launch of the AX-4 private astronaut mission to the ISS, pending resolution of an air leak in the Russian segment. The mission was delayed from its original June 11th date due to a liquid oxygen leak in the Falcon 9 rocket and concerns over a persistent leak in the module's vestibule. While Roscosmos claims the issue has been fixed, NASA is still evaluating hatch seals for potential problems, Space News has reported. Meanwhile, SpaceX CEO Elon Musk renewed his call for retiring the aging space station by the year 2027, citing safety concerns and limited utility.